Good evening, everyone. Today we'll be continuing with Australian novels, and what yesterday I had started with you, started to explain you the first flight. How did the British colonial empire came and they explored and they colonized Australia, and then how the literature took form and shape of the nation. This we had done very broadly yesterday. Today we are going to continue with it, and we are going to see when the federation came into being. I mean, the Australian Federation, then how what kind of reformation took place in the continent of Australia, which subsequently had its effect in the literature, and especially in the novels that we shall do today. We saw that after the British colonial empire came, it had its good domination, and also in the meanwhile they spread the language. English was spread. All right, and then these Australian writers, they tried to test their metal in English writing, and they produced multiple novels of great effect. Some of them yesterday I discussed were classics as well. And then in this way, Australian novels came into being, and they came into the limelight also because subsequently they started winning prestigious awards as well. Now today we are going to see highlight few novels written by them. Mainly today we'll be broadly discussing about Miles Franklin's My Brilliant Career, that we are going to do very broadly. But before we start, I'll give a brief idea about how this federation started, and then how um, you know how we how these Australian writers um, they framed their own historical perspective in their novels. That also we'll discuss before we get deeply into Miles Franklin's My Brilliant Career. Okay, now starting with yesterday, I was discussing with you. I'll go a little bit on that because it is connected with our present today's discussion. So we saw that the first arrival we called the first fleet of the British in the Australian lands. So as I was discussing yesterday, they arrived in the late 18th century, and they started uh, uh, settling in the particularly they started settling in the coast of Australia. And gradually, if you see, in the early 19th century, the settlement was at its peak. Many migrants were coming and settling down in different parts of the continent. Okay, and in this way, subsequently they formed six independent colonies. All right, and the name of these six prominent colonies are New South Wales, Victoria, Queensland, South Australia, Tasmania, and West Australia. So these are the initial six colonies that they formed. Okay, and they formed this colony. They set up. Okay, but the Australian people, they had a lot of problem with the British settlement over here, and finally they let out this British from their country in first January 1901. Okay, and then the Commonwealth of Australia was formed. I think you must remember this when you'll be taking your exams. You need to write it down in your answer sheets that the Commonwealth Australia came into being on 1st January 1901. Okay, and Edmund Barton became the first Prime Minister of Australia. Edmund Barton, he became the first Prime Minister of Australia. And it is very interesting and exciting to know that the whole Australia is a continent. The whole continent became a country. Okay, so when you say Indian subcontinent, then Indian subcontinent comprises of India, Bangladesh, okay, Pakistan, and all the countries which are very much attached to India. Okay, so that becomes Indian subcontinent. Whereas if you see Australia, it is a nation which in itself is a continent. Okay, So it is a very interesting thing to see such a huge landmass, but it comes to be known as one single country, that is Australia. Okay, now uh, we see that Australia became a federation also. So what is this federation? We are going to deal with it quickly, and then we'll move over to the novels and their significance. Now, this they these Australians, they decided that they are going to convert this when Australia became independent from British rule. They decided that that this independent Australia, where there were too many isolated colonies left over. Okay, that they are going to convert this into a federation. Federation. Okay, so they decided that the name federation was welcomed by all the colonies. Okay, the colonies where the British have already left, and it was decided that these colonies will be henceforth known as the federation. Okay, so they all but there were many who did not like this idea of a federation. But minor, there were minor pockets of the society who did not like it to become federation, but there were many who who wanted these colonies to become federation, and then that happened. Okay, so uh, there were many reasons why you can say that many people preferred the federation to be there, because they felt that these colonies, they were already settled. These colonies were already settled, and different people, different society, different people from different location have come and settled here. Okay, for different reasons, as I was telling in my I think a couple of days back, day before yesterday, I was discussing that from for different reasons people came and settled here. Okay, and you can then they said that there were different stages of economical growth and development. Different cities in these colonies had become a hub of capitalistic income. All right, so smaller colonies thought that they would be they would be neglected. So that is why federation means where equality will have to be there. But there were bigger colonies and smaller colonies. In bigger colonies there were more development, more urbanization, while smaller colonies were not that urban. So the smaller colonies fear that they might be overlooked. So but on the other hand, you see and that is why they did not smaller colonies did not prefer federation to be maintained. Okay, and there's another reason that these two age places, two what you call colonies, namely Victoria and New South Wales, they had rivalry. Okay, so they did not want federation at that time. But if you see on the other hand, these were the two reasons why federation was not wanted by some minor pockets of the society, like Victoria, um, like small colonies. But if you see on the other hand, there were many who preferred federation. Okay, because they thought that communication will improve and transportation will improve when federation is declared. Then all facilities they'll get of modern life. Railways will get improved. Okay, and when there were isolations in many colonies, but they thought that when federation will come, so this isolation will vanish by development of more transportation with different colonies. That is why they preferred federation should come, and that should maintain all kind of development equal for everybody. Okay, uniformity has to be maintained, they decided. So in 1889 they suggested that they all the colonial army, they should join and they should form one federal army. Okay, and national Australian government would be the local government, that they decided. So for them independence meant federation. All right, so they decided that when the British go, they'll have their own federation. and the bill was finally passed, and the Commonwealth Australia, they formed their own constitutional act, and they passed through the British Parliament in 1900, and finally 1901 January, they had their own federation. Australian continent had its own federation. Okay, if you see the 1980s, okay, that whole decade of 1980s, starting from 1890s, from 1890 to 1899, you see that particular decade, that particular 10 year, it was, it was very remarkable in the history of Australian politics and cultural history. Okay, and it was also a high time for the development of literature as well. Not only history and society had its major shift, and it has its own dynamics, but literature also had a high potential during those 1890s, that decade. Okay, now those literary historians of that time, they directed, they wrote the literary history in such a way, okay, that all the narratives written and produced during that time, it showed a really turning point in the history of Australian narratives, of Australian literature. Okay, so you may call that this was a kind of renaissance in the Australian continent. Okay, the Renaissance that we usually read in British history. Here you see this 1890s was a period of Renaissance, where literature was quickly being produced. That yesterday we discussed a lot of novels that were written and published during 1890s. Okay, so there was a high rise, and new forms and techniques, and experimentations were done, especially in the novel writing genre. So this was a very formative phase uh, in the literary history of Australia. So I think we have discussed this a lot yesterday. Now moving on to the typical literature writing and literature and the dissemination of literary work. The initial thing that we see in 1890s was that 1890s was mainly dominated by a bulletin called Sydney Bulletin. Okay, it was a magazine. Okay, and it became very famous among the Australian mass. Okay, and this was called Sydney Bulletin. Yeah, and this magazine, it was important because not only people read and enjoyed that, but that helped Australian people to to raise their nationalist spirit. All right, so this Sydney Bulletin, for much of the good reason, it was one of the most highly read magazines. Okay, and that spread quite a lot of equality among people. People read, and people could attach to each other with regard to their nationality, and they developed a sense of love and respect for their nation, and the idea of cultural nationalism started to take off from initially from 1890s, and Sydney Bulletin had a lot of contribution towards this upliftment of the nationalist feeling. Okay, so you can see that this Sydney Bulletin, it played a vital role in in developing Australian nationalism, and the literary editor of this Sydney Bulletin, there was a page called Red Page. This was usually published during 1894 to 1906. This Red Page particularly had a great role in promoting literature. Okay, and that was very authentic, that was very real. The Red Page. Okay, so apart from rising nationalist feeling, there was a Red Page in this bulletin that gave a lot of importance and priority to literature. Okay, and it specified the some good writers of the time. It hailed some, great novelists also of the time. And uh, gradually you see that a feeling of nationalism has been already started to sparkle in the hearts of the Australian people. So when these novels were written, yesterday also I was discussing, this novels also were quite, quite clearly pointing out towards their nationalistic feelings. There were many writers you will find at the beginning of 20th century, 1900, 1, 2, 3, 4, that we were discussing yesterday also. So the initial writers of the new decade, new century, that was 20th century, very clearly, very boldly, they supported their nationalistic bent of mind. Okay, they did not hesitate. They very directly, very much audibly, they articulated their feeling towards their homeland. Okay, so yesterday also I was discussing writers like Vance, Nettie Palmer, Miles Franklin. They were the prominent writers who formed a bulk of national literature. Okay, and this is very important for you. So during the time of federation, you can see, and the writers that appeared just following the formation of federation in the year 1901. Okay, this feeling of nation who started developing, and writers, they were starting to get influenced by this idea of nationalism, of love towards their, towards their country. So they discovered these new aspects, new ideas, and they started penning it down in their novels. Now, if you see this early decade of 20th century, two of Australia's most famous author, they published their major works. Okay, you need to remember this. First is Miles Franklin's My Brilliant Career, and Henry Lawson's Joe Wilson and His Mates. These are the two very, very prominent work of the two authors who wrote during the initial years of 20th century. Okay, Miles Franklin's My Brilliant Career, and Henry Lawson's Joe Wilson and His Mates. Now, if you look at Mary Franklin, and if you look at her, uh, perspective in her writings, you will see that, just a second. Okay, so if you see Mary Franklin's career, and if you see the style of writing, if you read the novel My Brilliant Career, you will see that she also shows a lot of national pride. Okay, because I'm quoting here, she says in her novel, I'm proud to be an Australian, a daughter of the Southern Cross, a child of the mighty bush. Okay, so see, she is also very clearly, she is showing her, nationalistic feeling, her pride to be born as an Australian. Okay, and this also instills a kind of inspiration for many readers, uh, uh, towards sincerity and dedication towards the nation. Okay, and if you see James Murphy, The Legend of a Man and His Book, in this book, she has written this book, Miles Franklin. After My Brilliant Career, she has written another novel called James Furphy, The Legend of a Man and His Book. In that book also, she has, expressed a lot of lot of feeling, lot of love and attachment and pride towards her country. So this is what you can call is national literature. Okay, because that gives you the fragrance of the soil of the land. Okay. Now, if you see A.B. Banjo Patterson, okay, then he has composed Waltzing Matilda and other bush ballads, poetry, he's written poetry. And another writer, just now I named him, Henry Lawson. He has also written a short story in his collection called Joe Wilson and His Mates in 1901. Another collection is Wild the Billy Boyles in 1896 and Children of the Bush in 1902. All these together, they form a very beautiful collection of the Australian nationalist pride. Okay, so nationalism, you can say, was at the high rise in Australian novelists. You can say roughly starting from 1880s to 1900s. Okay, so there were many novelists who were attached to this nationalistic movement. Okay, and they believe that novel writing is one of the forms which doesn't only belong to nation but should be about the nation. Okay, it should capture the thoughts, it should capture the dreams of the ordinary people. All right, and it should be very much authentic. It should come very much from your heart, and it has to be written down in paper so that it will be read by the common mass of Australia. And all the Australians should have this common feeling of nationalism that will bring unity, that will become, that will create the feeling of togetherness, a compactness in the country. Okay, so this was their idea, the author's idea during the time. So, they were trying to, these writers at the same time, they were. Yeah, it somehow got disconnected. I'm back. Now, what I was saying that all these writers together, they tried to create a kind of nationalistic fervor. Okay, and they thought that this is for the country. So these novels, these writings should be about the country. So they were very much stuck to this idea of patriotism in their writing. They showed a lot of pride in their writing. Okay, so they were trying to have a kind of voice that was that was uniform. Okay, all the writers tried to create a uniform voice. Okay, so and then you will see that instead of a lot of going over romanticism, they f- they chose realism in their writing. Okay, so they preferred action and less of emotion. All right, they preferred more of location than giving importance to any domestic word. All right, so this was the typical feature of these writers. They believed in reality, the real existence, instead of going on for some romanticism. They believed to stay stuck to the realistic features of the country, of the nation, of their livelihood. All right. So you can see that late 19th century, early 20th century has had remarkable nationalistic feeling. And also do not forget that although there were female writers, women writers were there, but there were many writers, particularly from the men's side, who celebrated masculine values. Okay. This aspect was also a part of the then Australian novels, particularly. Uh, so let's see who are the writers the novelists who wrote and who had this typical federation idea of federation in their writing. We are going to see. First comes Henry Lawson. Henry Lawson was born in the year 1867 and he died in 1922. Okay, and he was one of the very famous and eminent writers belonging to the domain of Australia. Okay, and he was also famous during that great historical time of 1890s and the early 20th century. So Henry Lawson, he began his career as a poet. Okay. He for a long time he continued writing poetries, but later he became famous short story writer. Okay. So some of his very famous stories are The Drover's Wife, The Bush Undertaker, and The Union Buries Its Dead. So these are some of his famous short stories. Okay, they are considered as the classics arising from the domain of Australia. Okay, so the name of his books are, the collection of short stories. Um, uh, few collection of short stories. Their names are Where the Billy Boils, Joe Wilson and His Mates, and The Country I Come From. Okay, so these are the books which have got the collection of short stories. Um, and in Australian domain, he's considered as one of the legends, literary legends who wrote excellent short stories. Okay. So if you see Lawson as a writer, then you will find that he had played significant role in creating authentic literary voice. Okay, the original voice of Australia you will find from Lawson's writing. Okay, so he felt when he was writing poetry, then he felt that his poetry should also be about the people. Okay, his poetry should be dedicated uh, to the common people, to the common folks. Okay, and so that they can enjoy, they can also attach themselves to the poetry. So, if you see Lawson, you will see all the values were deeply embedded in his identity, which ensured his nationalistic ideology, which was typical in the late 18th century and late 19th century and early 20th century. And he became an international figure for his writings, for his short stories particularly. Okay, and Australians and Australian critics, they regard him as the architect of Australian national identity in literature. Okay, so by if you see 1901, he had already published his famous works, Joe Wilson and His Mates, and during this time, during early 20th century, he had already gained a lot of fame, and his name was already associated with the pioneering Australian writers. Mm, so for many years, you can see he was struggling with this national identity, but finally, if you see from the dawn of 20th century, he becomes an eminent figure who talks vastly, who talks very significantly about Australian national identity. Okay, now students, just hold on for 2 minutes. Okay, yes, I'm back. Now we will. Now this was what was Henry Lawson in very brief. Now we will see Miles Franklin, because uh, we have a lot to discuss on Miles Franklin. Now Miles Franklin also, just like Lawson, is one of the very distinguished writers of Australian domain, and she became famous. And she wrote very well. She started writing, very well from the early 20th century. Okay. So she was born in 1879 and she died in 1954. Okay. So, Franklin is so famous that after her name, Australian people have named the most prestigious literary award in her name. Okay, Miles Franklin Award. So, one who writes very well is given Miles Franklin Award. Okay, but if you read Franklin, and if you see her in detail, she didn't use, in many of her novels. She did not use her name as Franklin. She had used her pseudonym as Brent of Bin Bin. Okay, Brent of Bin Bin. What a lovely pseudonym. Brent, Brent, Brent of Bin Bin. Okay, and her famous novel includes My Brilliant Career, published in 1901, then Some Everyday Folk and Dawn, published in 1909, All That Swagger, published in 1936, My Career Goes Bung, 1946. Okay. You can, if you see if you see Franklin's background, then you will find that for many years she had lived in the USA and England also. Okay, and she has used her talent in developing Australian tradition, okay, and democratic literature. So, though she lived for many years in abroad, but she also had her, dedication towards Australia. She wrote many things about Australian tradition. Okay, now we will see what is she saying in her My Brilliant Career. In My Brilliant Career, we are going to discuss, we are very broadly going to discuss My Brilliant Career, and if you see the novel, you will find that it was written with her own name, no pseudonym. She has published it under her own name, and Henry Lawson had written the preface to her novel. Okay, and Henry Lawson, in the preface, he tells the story of a young girl called Sibylla Melvin. Okay. And then there's a very sensitive description of Australian landscapes in the novel that Lawson has remarked as true to Australia, the truest I ever read. Okay. And if you read the novel, then you will feel that it has a very strong feminist idea. And also at the same time, Franklin has a lot of things to say about her nationalistic discourse of the time. Okay, so you can see that Franklin stands out among other national novelists of the Federation period, because you see it is written from the feminine point of view, whereas if you read other Australian nationalist novel, you will see that masculinistic rejoicing is there, but Franklin gives her shape from the feminine point of view. Okay, so a lot of feministic idea, and then the national tradition is attached in her writing, that makes the whole novel a beautiful piece of literature. Now, next writer is, I'm naming some few famous writers and giving short biographies about them, but after this, we will be broadly going through Mary Franklin. Now, the next writer in the Australian domain is Joseph Furphy. He was born in 1843 and died in 1912. Okay, and he was, as Mary Franklin says, that he was the founding father of the novel writing. Uh, no, he wrote two novels and he wrote many short stories. Okay, and all mainly these two novels had similar kind of nationalistic flavor. Okay, so his novel, one novel's name is Such Is Life. So such is life is is an important piece of novel, and although there were lots of criticism, but still it survives. It has passed through all the tests of time. It survives, and people till today they read and they appreciate such is life. Okay, and if you read such as life, you will find there is a deep cultural ethos present in the novel, and like other novels of the time, it gives us a very deep sense of nationalistic feeling. Okay, and how this writer Joseph Furphy, he had a lot of emotion towards helping Australia get free from the British clutches. Okay, and Furphy wanted the Australian people, the general Australian public, to be free from that mental colonialism. Okay, which means that although colonial power has gone, but mentally we are still under that trauma and shock. So he wanted his people to get off with that kind of trauma and shock. Okay, so such is life is very famous novel of its time, and it is considered as one of the classics during the Federation period, and it was widely read and accepted by the people of Australia. Okay, now, if you see the background of Furphy, you will see that he was born in a place called Yarra Valley in Victoria. Okay, and he was the child of Irish Protestant people, Irish Protestant parents. Okay, and his father had a farm, and for some time he worked in his father's farm. Okay, but later he moved because he wanted to do various other jobs. So he worked for many years as a mechanic operator also. Okay, so he was working as a machine operator. Then for many years he worked as a laborer and so on. Okay, so uh, he moved on with these mean jobs, and then came the time of independence of Australia. Just hold on. Yeah, I'm back. Now, I was discussing about the writer Furphy. So, after doing a lot of menial work, very minor work, he moved on to his brother's house in Victoria. Okay, so and he got independent from all this work, and now when he moved to his brother's family, he got opportunity to read. Okay, in a mechanics institute, there he got education. Yeah. Somehow I again got disconnected, some net issues. So when he went to his brother's place, from then he got some opportunity to get education. Okay. So after he got a bit of education, he started contributing through writing his short stories. Okay. But before that, he sent some, some articles to the bulletin. Okay, the bulletin, which was very famous at that time. Okay, and he had become known also through his bulletin. And by 1897, he completed his first novel, and then he sent to the editor of the bulletin for his comments. Okay, and the editor, he suggested some revision, some changes. Okay, and Furphy did accordingly. So eventually, the novel was published in 1903, and that is Such is Life. Okay, Such is Life. The full name of the novel is Such is Life. Being certain, extracts from the diary of Tom Collins. This is the whole name of the full name of the novel. Okay. Then after that, he completed two other books, the Bulbul and the Brolga and Rigby's Romance. Okay. And in 1905, he moved to Western Australia. He went to his sons and he died there in 1912. Okay. So, if you write about Furphy, you can say that he was one of those Federation writers who belong to the Federation period. Okay, and by mid 20th century, he was a very famous writer. Even though he died, but his novels were read and appreciated by people. Okay, and if you remember when I was talking about Miles Franklin, she wrote one full length write up called Joseph Furphy, The Legend of a Man and His Book, that she published in 1944. Okay, so she dedicated this full length study on Joseph Furphy. Now, we will see broadly Mile Franklin and what she had written, what was the content, and why was her novel My Brilliant Career so important in the history of Australian literature. We are going to do that in a very broad manner now. Okay, so when you read this novel, My Brilliant Career, uh, by Miles Franklin, then you will notice that author loves being changing position. Okay, and changing position but remaining confined to womanhood. Okay, she very much prefers to be confined to womanhood, but she believes in changing the perspectives. Okay, uh, Like many other countries, people are very, very pessimistic about female writing. So similarly, people there also were very feminine, very pessimistic about Franklin and her perspective. Muskan, just mute yourself. Muskan, okay, fine. So here, she was very much fixed to her feminist perspectives. Okay, from female's point of view, or you can say that from the position of a woman, she writes. Mm, Miles Franklin writes. Okay, um, and people initially feared that what kind of writing could Franklin produce, but when Franklin wrote and her writing was published, people appreciated her. Okay, but initially, um, that writing about gender and being a female writer, people were very speculative. Okay, and many people took her identity as a woman very negatively, and they became very judgmental with regard to women writing novel. They had doubts about her literary merits. Okay, how she is going to depict Australia, what will be her views on masculine perception. So people were very doubtful, but when she wrote, people found a new fresh perspective in her writing. And when she wrote, apart from many typical female experiences, she broadly writes about marriage. Okay, and she at that time actually, Australia's women also, for women marriage was their option, just one option, that they grow up and they get married. Okay, and then these women, they were, caught between their values, they were caught between the expectations, and caught between their domestic issues. Okay, so Mary Franklin understands all these issues very well, and she very honestly and very frankly she gives the, the picture of the society of the time, which was very rigid. Okay, customs were very prevalent in Australia at that time, and I think that customs are extremely rigid when women are concerned. So similar was the case in the Australian continent, which Franklin very broadly describes. She describes in her writing how customs dominated Australian society during the turn of the century from 19th to 20th century. Okay, and she frankly writes that her options to write, her choices to write were very limited, and within those limited choice of writing, she has tried to produce whatever she has done. Okay, then her novel My Brilliant Career, if you read that novel, you will see a lot of agony, a lot of pain, lot of tears. Okay, in the entire novel. And you can say that this novel is semi autobiographical, means there's a mixture of fiction and autobiography. Okay, and here you will see the protagonist Sibylla Melvin. Okay, throughout the novel, Sibylla Melvin gives a first person narrative in the novel. Okay, and there is a preface also, where authorial comments are given by Sibylla herself, and this gives her an external writing presence. Okay, and this also emphasizes some ironic perspective on the events and people that is going to be there in the novel. Okay, and if you see in the novel, you will find that Sibylla is a very is a small girl and a happy kind of girl. Okay, and she she initially she's very happy kind of girl. Okay, enjoying her life, but for her, life doesn't remain happy for long time. Okay, for her, happiness is very short lived, and then she has to face a lot of misfortune in her family. Now Sibylla idolizes her father, means for her father was a hero figure. Her father was a heroic figure for her. But what happens gradually, that father moves the family to a little less. pleasant atmosphere. He moves along with the family to a less pleasant atmosphere. Okay, and gradually Sibylla comes to know that her father is not what she used to think. He is little disturbed, and he has little problems with the dealing with his property. And gradually Sibylla learns that due to some of his disturbed uh, condition, their financial status was falling down day by day. Okay. And when Sibylla grows up into adolescent as a teenager, uh, now she tries to explore the world around her with her fresh young eyes. Okay. And what she used to initially think about her parents, that idea also changes. Okay. And now she becomes wiser. Okay, in her teenage, she becomes wiser. And when she observes her parents very broadly, very minutely, then she develops a kind of harshness towards them. She doesn't like them anymore. Okay, and now as she grows up, she becomes very unsentimental towards her father's unsuccessful business dealings. Okay, in the childhood she knows that father is not a successful businessman, and they are getting poorer and poorer day by day. Okay, now as she grows up, she becomes very harsh towards the feelings, towards her father, because she comes to know that father is very unsuccessful businessman, and he's alcoholic also. And when she looks up at her mother, then she sees that mother is also very ill tempered lady. Okay, who doesn't deserve any respect. So she gradually loses all sort of respect towards her parents. Okay. However, Sibylla has a typical relationship with her oldest teenage uh, sibling. Okay, so she had a particular inclination towards her eldest sibling. So Sibylla had very hard domestic work she had to do by her family members. She is asked to fetch water for her drunken father. Mm. She has to suffer humiliation. She has to uh, you know uh, get a lot of embarrassment, because she is asked, she is forced by her family members to go to the to go to the bar, or to go to the pub where the father drinks, and she is forced to bring her father back from that drinking bar. Okay, where she gets a lot of humiliation, because she is bringing back an alcoholic father home. Okay, so here you can see a lot of pain and pathos is represented on the part of adolescent Sibylla. Okay, and another problem is that when you see father alcoholic, mother is not properly tempered, then you can see that Sibylla learns no culture. Okay, she gets no opportunity to read books. She doesn't get any chance to have sophisticated, good, plain conversation. Okay, no culture. She learns no culture. All right. Then then what happens? Her grandmother lives in some other city, and grandmother calls her to come and stay with her. So Sibylla goes to stay with her grandmother in that place called Cadagat. There she goes and lives with her grandmother. There she learns a little bit of refinement and culture. She gets an opportunity to read. Okay, and she gets a peaceful environment also with her grandmother. Okay, so whatever she had seen here in her parents' home, just the contrary environment she finds in the grandmother's place. So now her life changes. She becomes little polished and little cultured. Okay, so here you can see that Sibylla gets a little bit of self discovery. She discovers herself. Um, okay, so here. Here, when she comes to her grandmother's place at Kadagat, there's a person, I think it is his neighbor, there's a person called Henry Beecham. Okay, now this Henry Beecham is very rich, very wealthy landowner. Okay, and here you can see another character, Henry Beecham, comes, and she comes face to face with him, she sees him. However, this kind of harmonious life is very short lived, and again she is called back by her mother, when when her family's financial conditions get from bad to worse. Mother calls for her, and then she gets back to her mother's place. There she is again sent to work, as a governess. Okay, governess to to M. Swat family. Okay, there's a family called M. Swat. There she is forced to go and work as a governess. Governess means to take care of the kids. Okay. Mm, what happens there when now Sibylla is too young, she has to work as governess, and there maybe she must be having very exhaustive time. So there she gets nervous breakdown. Okay, and then again returns to her mother's place. So when you see the novel, when you read the novel, then the prologue is in epistolary form, means in the letter writing form, written by Sibylla. And there you will see what kind of trauma Sibylla passes throughout her life. um, Sibylla makes it clear that she is the protagonist, because the first person narration is addressed, and this and she addresses the whole issue to her. This epistolary form is written by Sibylla, and she addresses to her fellow Australians, and therefore you can say that this novel is semi autobiographical, where Sibylla may be actually the writer herself. Okay, and she is addressing to her fellow Australians. So at a nationalistic position, she is writing as a from the status of a woman in colonial Australia. Okay, and she was writing at the time when the when federation was explored, and the Australians were trying to experiment with this idea of federation. At that time, she writes this novel, and her prologue addresses to the people, to the common mass of uh, Australians. Okay, and there she had written a lot about economic harshness which was experienced by Miles Franklin at that time. Okay, and how realism was predominant in spite of romance. Okay, how ambition and work used to be a very difficult part for the citizens of Australia at that time. Okay, then she talks about racism also, that is there at the surface of the text. Okay, uh, through Sibylla's statements, we will find. Then you will find the most important thing is Sibylla's character. Okay, Sibylla's character lies in her serving as a representative of the dreams and struggle of working class woman. Okay, so Sibylla stands for a woman who had her own dreams and aspirations. Uh, okay, and also at the same time, she was a working class woman during the time of federation. So this federation transformation was not an easy one; it was difficult, and that difficulty was projected by by Miles Franklin. Okay, so when you read the novel, you will see that the theme of the novel, talks a lot about traditional elements of Australia. Okay, and if you read that, you will have a better idea of women in the colonial Australia, how they suffered, how they had their how they had their lifestyle led. Okay, you will have a broad idea about them when you read this novel. Now moving on, we'll see what kind of writing is My Brilliant Career. uh, Now, this is the another writing of Miles Franklin. Okay, my she began writing My Brilliant Career uh, from 1898. Okay, When she was just Franklin was just 18 years old, she starts writing My Brilliant Career. Okay, and the first draft was published in 1899. Uh, uh, that is towards the very end of the 19th century. Yeah. So this novel, My Brilliant Career, uh, here you see again Sibylla. She's enjoying a very happy and a very content life. She's a child. Okay, just hold on. Yeah. So let us see little broadly about these places. Yeah. So I will go a little broadly with this. I just give you the summary, but now I'll give a broad analysis of My Brilliant Career by Franklin. Now, when you see at the beginning, as I was telling you, that Sibylla is very young and she's having a very happy life in rural Australia. Okay, she's a happy and very playful girl, and although she had her dominating parents, but she did not understand that. Okay, and her father she always looked up to her father as a hero figure for her. Okay, so when as a child she idolizes her father because she thinks her father to be a man of ambition and gentlemanliness. Her father's name was Richard Melvin, and he was very much famous for his good nature, for his hospitality. Okay, and very frequently they used to invite people like doctors, lawyers, clergymen to the house. Okay, so as a young child, Sibylla was charmed by her parents. Okay, and also she appreciates and she meets very happily when she meets people from uh, uh, the people who are being invited by her parents. Okay, so overall you see that childhood is very happy and very comfortable and very normal one for Sibylla. Okay, now what kind of life did she live? So the place where she lived is it was known as Possum Gully. Possum, Possum Gully, Gully. Okay, so the kind of happy life that she expected was very short lived. Okay, she did not have a long happy life. Her happiness very short lived. So as she grows to be to be a young girl, she sees that her family's condition is going from bad to worse. Okay, and now when she's growing up she can see her parents more clearly. So earlier as I told you that she used to adore her father, now she becomes very discontent with her father, and she sees that her father is not able to manage his business properly. Okay, and he fails in his business, so he takes his family to little little low class environment, to a less cultured environment. Okay, so she feels that the family is now getting down in the economic ladder, and their life condition is also getting from bad to worse. The circumstances are deteriorating. Okay, and mother's mood also remains very bad. She has become very ill tempered and bad mannered. Okay. But if you see initially during her early youth, Sibylla was very sharp. Okay, and she was a very critical observer. Whatever she took it very. very critically and very minutely, and very minutely she observes that her family is failing ruthlessly. Okay, she could observe very clearly, even from her adolescent period, that very ruthlessly her family is failing. Because his father did not have much business knack, mother was very much below gentle behaved. Okay, she was becoming very merciless day by day. Okay, so as you read on, you see Sibylla's condition is going from bad to worse. And when you see this condition of Sibylla in the novel, you will start sympathizing her. Okay. Um, and initially you saw Sibylla very bright, very happy. Okay, you could expect a bright and brilliant future for her, but presently Sibylla is getting doomed because of the bad family culture. Okay. um, she had a good interest in music, in artistry related to music. Okay, she had a passionate voice also, but all these talents were hushed by her bad family conditions. She couldn't take out her skills. She couldn't develop herself as a human being because of the dire family conditions. Okay, now initially during her childhood days they were middle class, but now they were slowly getting into working class status. Okay, and one of the main reasons for their falling status is the experience of the father in business, and because of the mother's ruthless nature. Okay, so gradually Sibylla sees that her life is marked with hopelessness. Although family is struggling, but it is useless. And gradually father is now getting addicted too much to alcoholism. Hmm. And she is the eldest child, and she is a completely misunderstood teenage daughter. So Sibylla has to carry all the family misfortunes on her shoulders. So she is now, as she is the oldest, now she is forced to do hard physical work. Okay, of going to the dairy farm, of housekeeping. Okay, and with this hard physical labor she is deprived of any proper cultural training, cultural learning. She's completely deprived. So as I told you, uh, when her father is drunk and he's there in the bar, she is the one to go to the bar and bring her back, along with lots of humiliation and mockery. Okay, girl going to the bar bringing the father makes her ridiculed to a large extent. Now, there was a little bit change when she was called by her grandma. Okay, now her grandma lived in a place called Cadagat, Caddagat, Cadagat. Okay, so when she goes to Cadagat upon the insistence of her grandmother, then her life takes a positive turn. And she lives in Cadagat with her grandmother. And there she gets a gentle and comfortable home. Here she spends her days quite comfortably in the company of her Aunt Helen. She finds her uncle also, Uncle Julius, and her maternal grandmother. She lives very comfortable with her aunt, uncle, and grandmother. Hmm. So Sibylla, here at this point of time, she gets to know, to develop a taste for literature and music. She gets accustomed with a little bit of education also. Okay, and now there she used to have very hard physical labor, but now she gets the leisure time to read. She gets time to play piano. She gets time to sing. Okay, and now no more she has to endure domestic duties that she used to do at Posam Gully in her parents' place. And when she finds her aunt also very soothing, very comfortable person. Okay, and now at this place, grandmother's place, she gets a little bit of comfortable life. She gets to be accustomed with good culture. Okay, so here in Cadagat, Sibylla meets many people Now she is a young girl, a grown-up girl. She meets with several eligible men. Okay, and many of them are fascinated by her unusual kind of personality. Okay. um, but Sibylla is a little bit terrified to think about marriage because she has already witnessed her mother's horrible marriage. Okay, the a very failed marriage. So she is horrified to think about marriage. But even though there are many people, there are many many suitors who appreciate her in the way of marriage. But Sibylla is little reluctant from all this. Okay, but however, now she feels little bit comforted, and again once more she feels herself free spirited. Okay, and now whatever ugliness she had seen in her society, in her mother's place, now all those are slowly changing. Now here comes one character, Harold Beecham. He is a very eminent personality here in this place, and he gets very much attracted towards her, but she dismisses all of it because this marriage is very scary for her. um, there is another one, Harry. Anyway, after a few days, again she's called back to her family. Again she's pushed back to the reality of her family condition, because her mother again calls her back and summons her back, and she says that the condition at home is getting very bad, so you have to come back and work so that the family stays together. So again Sibylla had to get back, and now she's given the work of a governess in one Mr. M. Swart's house. Okay, and here, as a young girl, now she's shocked to see the dirt in the house. Okay, where she works as a governess. So there are so many children there to take care of. Okay, she had got lot of work again to take care of. So now here, looking at this condition of this house where she works as a governess, she is completely completely disturbed. She is so disturbed that she has a nervous problem. She gets the nervous breakdown, and she goes back to the house. Okay, she no more stays here as a governess, but she gets back to her to her house. Okay, so because of a nervous problem, she is not able to continue. Okay, so finally she completely breaks and she's no more able to continue working. Um, again she goes to the house, and after that, recovering little bit from that nervous breakdown, she does all the household chores. Okay, but now her spirit is very much lowered. Now here once what happens that Harry Beecham who had a softness towards her, he comes to visit her after 2 years, and he reminds her that she had promised one day that she will be marrying him. Okay, so he comes, but she turns him down. She doesn't want to marry anymore. Though he was a rich man with lot of money, but she's very much in trauma to think about marriage. And though she is relieved to see that he's a wealthy man, but no more she doesn't go into that risk of marriage. Okay, she, because she says that although you are very rich, but I have lost all my capacity to love. Okay, so this is how the story ends with my brilliant career. Okay, So you can see that how woman is portrayed in this novel, what is the plight, what is the condition of woman. So if you think about that, then you will see that there is a very hard patriarchal role, the role that she gets from her father. Because as a child she has got a lot of respect for her father. She looks at him as a heroic figure. But see what happens at the end, where father also fails to prove her what she really thought about him. Okay. So the whole conviction of her life falls when she sees that what she used to think about father was actually an illusion. Father was somebody else from whatever she had thought about him. Okay, so the whole perception changes, and her life is continuously in a turmoil where there is no relief from family or from society. And that is why you can see finally she has a complete nervous breakdown. Okay, now we'll see how nationalism comes in this novel. Okay, what kind of nationalistic feeling do we find in this novel? Now, the preface, as I told you, is in the epistolary form, and it is addressed to my dear fellow Australians. Okay, so it gives a nationalistic position where a writer writes to each and every citizen of Australia. Okay, so Lawson has written the preface, as I told you, to the novel, and he says he talks about the emotional parts of the novels, and he claims that the novel is more realistic than emotional. Okay, because it talks a lot about the existential issues of the women of the time, instead of being emotional. Okay, so being a female writer, she proves to be quite realistic than emotional. Okay, and if you see Australia as a land, uh, it has been settled by Europeans long time ago. Okay, so this land, this physical place, Australia, uh, is much older. Okay, so here Australia, is very famous for its natural environment. It is famous for its forest. It is famous for its huge mass of land. Okay, but the national identity that the Europeans have constructed for these Australians. Okay, so uh, that is little different. Okay, so the idea of the British that was created for the Australian was different, but here the Australian national identity is mainly based on bush legends. Okay, bush legends means prior to British, they were usually bushmen, they were rangers, okay, they were people working with the nature. Okay, so that is what is Australia is. Before British came, Australians were fearless people. Okay, and so after British came and after they went, the whole identity of Australia's mass changed. Okay, so despite having a nationalistic position, Miles Franklin, she deeply shows her, how uh, Australia and what is the masculine aspect of Australia that she is showing, and that masculine aspect that she is showing is very dark, is very pessimistic. It's not at all glorifying. Okay, so because here you see the central character Sibylla, she is constantly struggling with the harshness of life at home, with the failure of her father to sustain the family. So everything you see is very much disturbing as for uh, as for a woman living in the then society, because the patriarch of the family doesn't prove himself masculine enough to stand the test of the maintenance of proper family. Okay, Now you can see a lot of feminist perspective is there, although you can find it easily. So it is called a feminist text. Okay. Um, so the central theme, you can say, it is about the woman. Um, okay, and how women of the time were intellectually suppressed in the patriarchal world. Okay, and it shows how Franklin is able to make a style of her own in her debut novel. This is a debut novel, but how she has maintained the style, the perfection of a feminist heroine who fails in the course of the novel, uh, to come up as a brilliant career, okay, to become a hero despite adversity. Nothing of that sort happens. Okay, here you see the protagonist completely fails at the end. She's having a complete nervous wreck at the end. She is incapable to marry as well. Okay, so here you see the complete failure of this woman. So these issues are very sensitive if you consider from the feminist point of view. All right. So although you can see that the childhood of Sibylla is very comfortable, but very quickly it turns to be very drastic, very, very negative, very bleak, and very dark. So this is, and you can see the title to be very ironic, because there is nothing brilliant, there is nothing nice, and there is nothing good about the career of Sibylla. So, My Brilliant Career, the title itself is quite ironic. The title itself portrays something else that is being depicted in the novel. Okay, and the novel, which is quite bleak for women of the time in Australia, when Federation was taking its form and shape, women were suffering actually, because the economic impact gets heavier upon women. Okay, and their sensitivity. Okay, because they are forced, they are pushed to work harder and harder beyond their capability, which is what happened to Sibylla, and which is why she was, towards the end, towards the climax, she was doomed. She was destroyed. Okay, by the conventions of the family and the society. So with this, I come to an end with this block. Tomorrow we shall continue with the next block of Australian novels. So for now, I log out. We'll meet tomorrow, same time.